Oh, have you guys followed the cake decision that came out
I did.
uh,
Yeah.
yesterday? Any thoughts on that? That was a
That
big win.
decision.
I didn't get past the headline on it actually. So, but I don't know. Let me actually. I'll take a quick look at it maybe while Halsey's talking and.
I read the whole thing. It's just a bad decision.
What? How
So
so? I thought that the cake maker won.
no, he really didn't. Basically, the decision was that A, it's art. So you have to hold art to a certain higher level of scrutiny. B, it's more religious in nature, but it's the way they went after them and the context in which they went after them. It was a very weak decision for religious liberty and for freedom of association, and it leaves the door wide open for more people to go through this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. But I mean, that was sort of like the grounds that the defendants. Well, I guess who was the plaintiff? Wasn't the plaintiff actually the cake shop?
Yeah,
I guess the plaintiffs were sort of arguing that it was the artistic component. I mean, they had sort of a. I don't know. I mean, these laws limiting freedom of association are just incredibly destructive. I mean, they're as destructive to like the cohesiveness of our culture as the 1965 Immigration Act is. Um,
Well, it was the 1964 civil rights legislation that codified all this. I mean, that was what destroyed freedom of association for,
right.
I mean, everything was there. There's no hope competing. I mean, that was really the moment that America completely abandoned the bedrock principle of freedom of association, that you don't have the right to do whatever you want with your private property. The principles of diversity supersede everything, racial diversity, and only with respect to protected minority groups.
No, there's no doubt, and I don't know like where the bright light is on sort of undoing that. I mean, I mean, you're an attorney, frame, so maybe you can talk about this more. But it would seem that there's like so much precedent built up that I mean, how could you get a court to flip something like that? Especially since conservative judges like don't have nearly the same level of Machiavellian willingness to rationalize their desired outcome into their reading of the law. The way
Yeah.
that
Well, the business infrastructure is massive and so vast that it really will take at least half a century to dismantle, or at least to substantially dismantle. The legal structure is extremely solid, but fragile because it's based on only a few statutes and court decisions upon which all of the other sprawling common law has been developed. And if those few key points are overturned, then all of the common law built on top of it is thrown out with it. So that legally is actually much easier to dismantle than it is commercially. But I don't think that you will get that legal victory until you have a cultural victory. So the order of operations is cultural, legal, business, and that's exactly what happened beginning in the 19 teens with setting up the Cultural Revolution, which culminated in the legal revolution of the 1960s, which resulted in the business revolution from the 1960s to now, which has been the industrialization of identity politics.
so the 19 teens cultural revolution. I have never heard that before. Can you?
Yeah, yeah. There was just like a shit ton of things that happened in like 1913, like that sort of like laid the groundwork for the Frankfurt School to get its feet wet. Really, like they sort of arrived on somewhat fertile soil, and then the 1920s is obviously the Frankfurt School. I think they were like 1923 or something when they really fully set up shop. But there were a number of early transplants here, and there was a lot of pressure put on like the Wilson administration and stuff. I mean, this is also when you had like a lot of revolutionary changes in in finance, right? You had the Federal Reserve set up. You had the the income tax, and you had all these things that happened around that time. But part of that was driven through. I don't know how much you want me to go on about
No,
this.
go on. I'm interested. I haven't really thought of this time period as being as critical as I think you're putting out.
Okay, well, sure. So take for example the Zionist groups, right? Like if you want to talk about like identity politics and the diversity machine, right? I mean, Zionism really started in like the 1880s, 1890s. It started
1860s.
1860s. Thanks. It started way before what people think about. Oh, Israel formed in 1948. Like so Zionism started after World War II because of the Holocaust. That's what most people think. Like they have no fucking idea. It took what, like I thought it was 60, but Halsey's telling me it's like
80.
It's like 80 years. 80 years. Did you know that, Brundle?
No, I recently looked up Herzl, and I think it was like 1860s or 70s, right?
All right. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, but there's
the Jews came to Palestine in 3 waves, and the first wave in 1860s was mostly from Russia, and it pretty much almost didn't make it. Like, I mean, they had small farming villages. They were only allowed to live on malarial swamps, which they drained and turned into farmland. I mean, it was almost just a time where they almost gave up. Those were the times where they were considering another place, like possibly like Zimbabwe or Argentina. There were a couple other places they considered.
Yeah, I mean, remember the Balfour Declaration was 1917.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's like securing British support